Hello, friends. Today, I'm DarrenT. Okay, not really. I've got my tasty beverage. And for those of you who may have thought, based on my the video I posted last week about changes to my channel, those who wondered if I wasn't going to be live streaming anymore, actually, I was going to take this week off. And kind of look for a better time to maybe live stream on a regular basis in a somewhat predictable way. Today, I had a few things I wanted to chat about, and so for that reason, I don't expect this will go as long as DarrenT's Tea Time live streams, but because Darren's off this week, and I think he might be off next as well, but because Darren's off, I thought, well, you know what, I'll just steal his time, which for us in the United States is typically 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, which I think for Darren, good morning, Maria. I think for Darren, that's probably 3 p.m. in England. Not sure about that. But yeah, I figured I'll go ahead and steal Darren's time this week and just cover a few things that I thought would be interesting to me and might be interesting to you. And to improve my live streams, I actually put in the description what the agenda is for today's live stream, which are basically 3 things. If I do my job, maybe I will go in and actually indicate the times where the different parts of the live stream kick in. So, with that said, the agenda is 3 things. I'm looking at my little journal. And by the way, the second topic, which has to do with YouTube as a platform, really comes from this. I've mentioned this before, but if you go in really, really close here, you'll notice this is the Spiral Notebook. And I only half joking said last week that I think if I were going to have one actual contribution to the world that really makes a difference, makes the world a little better place, it would actually be the Spiral Notebook. It would be my journals, because the way I do it, and I do it almost every day, it's sort of inundated with cartoons who are arguing with each other, and as I sort of puzzle things out, that's my artsy-fartsy methodology. So, with that, we have 3 concurrent viewers. Identify yourself. Identify yourself. If you're here, and obviously you are, then do me a favor and identify yourself, so I know who you are. And I like connecting with my viewers, and that kind of dovetails very naturally into the first topic. The first topic was just a really quick recap of a couple things about this short that I posted yesterday. I didn't post it, by the way, just to be clear, as a YouTube short. And I'm in the process right now of grokking out what the whole story behind YouTube Shorts is. It appears that YouTube, if you actually post a video that's less than 1 minute long, though, it automatically becomes a YouTube Short. Okay, so as far as I know, that's pretty much the only thing I know about it at this point. But it does suggest that if I wanted to make that short more searchable as a YouTube short, I might want to adjust the hashtags with maybe something like Blended Planet, I guess, or a couple other things. But that's another thing I need to actually look into. Hey, Inio-san, welcome. Good morning. Another thing I need to look into is actually hashtags on YouTube videos. So if anybody knows that, or has a link that you can describe, because you can't really post links in the chat, let me know what you know about hashtags, because I've been putting hashtags in my descriptions, and I don't even know if that's the appropriate thing to do. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But anyway, that's one of the things I need to look into. But anyway, a couple thoughts about this short. There were basically 2 things about it that I wanted to point out. One is, I noticed an audio hiccup in Tahoma 2D that you might want to be aware of, and it kind of speaks to why, if you're going to try to put something together with audio, you might be, you really probably want to have a dedicated audio program for editing your audio, and don't necessarily look at OpenTunes or Tahoma 2D as a place to actually edit the audio. And the reason for that is what I noticed was that if I, and by the way, again, if somebody knows the answer to this and I'm missing something, please weigh in and let me know. But if I take this little piece right here and I hit Control X, okay, so it ripple edits it and obviously shortens the audio by removing that little gap in between. Okay, what I noticed was that if you set a marker, well, if you play it back, watch what happens.
Wonder how the new guy's doing.
Okay, so this is kind of interesting. What the bug that I was about to highlight did not happen just now. Figures, you go live and then the bug doesn't reproduce itself. But in many other cases, what I've found is if you chop a piece out of your audio, what it does is it continues playing as if it weren't chopped. So again, I don't know if that's a known bug or if there's some different way of doing it that would mitigate that problem. But if you guys happen to know, let me know, because it's not a big deal buster kind of thing, but it is a bit of a pain. What I found was that using the I think in practice your workflow would be something like this. You'd go ahead and animate against whatever audio you were pretty sure was going to be what you wanted, and then in your video editor, hey Ashnan, good morning. Then in your video editor, you would actually just go ahead and cut things there in order to trim down the animation. If you try to basically treat OpenTunes or Tahoma 2D as an editing platform, if you will, you're trying to get everything really pinned down in your animation software, it's going to be a little bit clunky compared to doing it in an editor. Okay, so that's my opinion. There are divergent views, I suppose, because if you look at, for my brother-in-law's card, I did import our singing audio direct into Tahoma. I'm going to the chat right now, by the way. And it cooperated pretty well. I didn't want to transfer the audio track into Shotcut because I timed the lip sync in Tahoma. Fair point, and I suppose under those auspices what you'd probably want to do is just re-export the audio from Tahoma with your cuts intact and then bring that into your video editor, and then that's kind of marrying the best of both worlds. And by the way, I'm about to sneeze. Yes, it's allergy season, and by the way, it's the most horrible time of the year. This really ain't funny. My nose is so runny. I'm not of good cheer. Okay, I just made that up on the fly. Well, that's what you can do when you're a jingle writer like I was for many years. Yeah. The period, actually usually it's from September 1st until the first frost. So it's usually about 6 to 8 weeks. This year it started a little earlier. So you get what you get. But anyway, so as far as this goes, the only other thing I wanted to show that I think would be of interest to you guys in regards to animation was something I discovered towards the end about tweening. And so I'm going to go back here, and I think what I'll do is I'll go ahead and turn the audio off just so we're not distracted by that. And then let me set, yes, okay. So I'm going to set a start marker here and a stop marker here so we can loop this section, okay? So now the thing that, and I'm with you, Maria, I agree with you that these pencil test kinds of things, they're a lot of fun, and it is, in fact, one of the things I like about Full Chain Animations videos, is that they basically are pencil tests. You know, in the course of creating Salt and Light, clearly I've learned very much where most of the time goes, and there's no question that it goes into ink and paint. That's really where most of your time goes, unless you're really struggling with the animation side of things, obviously. But what I found kind of interesting here was if you look really closely at this loop, maybe I should make this even tighter. Let me go from let me go from here to here. Okay, so what I found kind of cool about it is, for one thing, this was a fun diversion back to animating at 12 frames per second. Hey, Full Chain. Yeah, well, believe me, I always am careful never to live stream when Darren's live streaming. So today I'm like, okay, we'll do it. So now, since Full Chain is here, you might have some thoughts about what I'm about to share, because, again, what I was about to say is that the working at 12 frames per second, or obviously 24, full film resolution, is, it's both liberating on the one hand, and it's, it kind of ups your workload on the other, because at 8 frames a second, there's a lot of things that you can animate with a boop, a snap, boop, that play really just fine. And in fact, if you tweened it, what winds up happening is invariably the movement that you're trying to animate winds up taking too long. So you have to do the snap thing when you're working at 8 frames a second. So as I say, working at 12 or again 24 is kind of liberating and fun. And back in the day when I was doing the Akari animation thing, that was all done at 12 frames per second, and it was a lot of fun to do. If, by the way, and I'll just throw this out here, I don't know if you guys may not know what I'm talking about, so I'm going to go ahead and just show a brief bit of this in order to illustrate what I mean. So let me just give me half a second on the other screen. I'm going to just, let me transition over here. Okay, so I'm going to go into Blender, and actually, you know what? I should probably use Blender 2.81a, because I think the last time I had this open it was in Blender 2.81a, so it might be in the hot menu. Yep, there it is. Okay, so this is what I was talking about back before I started working on Salt and Light. I was working on this, and so this let me see here, got to make sure my hotkeys are correct. Yeah, okay, so let's just hit the play button. Okay, so this is essentially an anime type concept about a character that you're about to see whose name is Akari, and it's a very cool concept that my partner Valerie came up with, and basically it was an interesting exercise because we kind of, from my perspective, we were making it up as we went along, because I never knew what was going to come next until she told me, right? And so, but as you can see, this is more of your 12 frames per second kind of animation. And so, as again, I've told the story before, the reason I switched from this was just because after talking to my film distributor, it just seemed like the concept behind Salt and Light seemed like an appropriate concept for, for the time, in terms of what would be something maybe they would grab that might be something they'd want to distribute. Okay, so the business opportunity, if you will, presented itself. Now, in hindsight, I don't know that it's that much more of a business opportunity, because right now, I tell you the truth, guys, what I'm thinking about doing very seriously is punching up the soundtrack on this thing, which right now it doesn't have one. But what we did was we actually stole little audio clips from, I think it was Gintama, just a kind of an older anime where it happened that a lot of the dialogue didn't have any music under it, right? There was a lot of quiet voiceover, if you will. And so what we did was we'd steal these little vocal clips from Gintama where I have no idea what the people are saying, but I just stick it in there as a placeholder, and then we did subtitles to, like a closed caption kind of thing. And the whole thing was being done that way. And actually, I think it's kind of a legit way to do it. And so a show like this, I would see as being something that we would literally just release on YouTube, probably 5 minutes at a time. And if it grabs, it grabs. And then literally, I keep saying the word literally. I got that from Valerie. Just release it, in little short increments, and go from there. So anyway, the point of this diatribe was simply that I did enjoy working on this from the vantage point of working at 12 frames per second generally on the animation. There's some that's 24, and in truth, in kind of true to anime convention, even in Salt and Light when there's like a camera move or something, that's at full frame rate. But you can see this is definitely a little smoother than something that would be like a, something where you're locking to 8 frames per second. So hey, you guys, feel free to weigh in with your opinions. Is this something that we should punch up, polish up, and release online? I have a great affinity for this character. I love Akari. She's like Valerie. She's beautiful, but yet she's got an edge, baby, and it's a good edge. So anyway, there's that. Full-blown rain headache, which for sure is not fun. Yeah, sorry to hear that. Sorry to hear that, Maria. I hope you feel better. Okay, so what was I talking about? I was going to recap a tweening methodology, which is probably very unconventional, but here's what it is in a nutshell. What I did was, I thought, for a brief run, what if I try to almost work kind of sort of real time, okay? And what I mean by that is I'm just going to take these tweens out, okay? So here's the first pose, here's the last pose, and then I tweened it, okay? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these guys, and I think for now we'll just delete them. Okay, so I'm going to come over here, and by the way, somebody asked me, someone asked me about how I did this insofar as he actually asked if it was done on paper. I can't remember who asked the question. But so I'm answering that question right now in case that person is here. What I did was here in Tahoma, and you can do this in OpenTunes too, I use this brush, the charcoal brush. Okay, it's a cool brush because it gives you, if you use it softly, you get this really thick line, but when you press harder, it actually thins out. Quite useful. Okay, so now here's what I need to do for the purpose of this little demonstration. I'm going to actually copy this key over here, and the reason I'm doing that is because if I don't, I won't be able to toggle like this with the minus sign, plus sign keys. I won't be able to toggle from one pose to the other because it will not do the toggling when the previous frame is on a different level. Okay, so hey Max. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to make these blank keys. Oops. I'm just going to blank, 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 and then I'm going to take this and move it back over here. Okay? So for our purposes, let's go ahead and turn this into a loop, so we're just limiting ourselves to this, and then we'll just turn this off. So this is the whole thing now. Okay, so this is what I found was kind of interesting. And your mileage may vary. You guys give it a try if you want, but what I did was I said, okay, and by the way, the smart way to do this probably would have been something like this. You would probably have a separate level, okay? You would probably have a separate level where, and I'll just go ahead and use the charcoal brush again, but this time we'll go red, where the stuff that you want to animate, you might mark it here, let's say, put these marks in here kind of thing. All right, just kind of tracing it. And then you'd go to your final pose and you draw the same thing all on a single level. I'm going to ballpark it because it's going to auto create a frame and I don't really want it to. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mark where this needs to be and go like this. Okay, so now what that does is that gives you a guide, and then you could say, well, I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tweens, right? And so in that scenario, you're talking about doing something like this. Here's your arc of movement, and then you say, well, there's 1, 2, 3, well, that's 3 tweens, 4, 5, 6, 7. And if you want, obviously there's no easing here. Okay, if you were going to do easing, I probably should mention this because the purists out there will go, hey, Dave, what about easing? Then it might be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then maybe an ease back in here at the end. So you can see the timing. We'll just turn this color down so that you can see the change in the timing there. Okay. Now this is important to note that I did not do this. Okay. I did not provide a guide when I did it. Here's what I actually did. I said, okay, here's this head. So I kind of lightly with my charcoal pencil, I can kind of, I can kind of sketch, right? So I said, okay, B key. So here's a line, and I need to get to here. So I just put my stylus over, I'm actually holding my stylus over the screen at the edge of his head. And I can see the other edges here. So then I'm talking about doing something like this, literally. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to keep going in this vein. If you can believe this, this is what I was doing. So I'm like, okay, here's the arc of his arm. One, two, 2, 3, 4. I think I can. You can kind of feel where it's maybe moving too fast or whatever. Okay. Okay. There's position 1. Position 2 didn't change very much, so here we'd go. And I'm literally just toggling between. And I mean, look at this. Okay. All I want to do is note. Okay, so this is a little bit arced in. This is pretty much straight. So straight, here we go. Like so. Here. Boom. Okay, again, not much change. But then I'm kind of going like this. I'm literally just making it almost real time. And it becomes kind of fun, frankly. Because you're really getting a result quickly here. So obviously here what we need to do is... And then you can see the obvious mistakes. Like so. So full chain, you do the easing and drawing in betweens first to see if it needs any more in betweens after that. Yeah, and that would be, I think that would be more the conventional methodology. In that you're doing it pose to pose as opposed to straight ahead. And that's basically what I'm trying to do is I'm saying, well, let's do pose to pose. Let's do pose to pose, but so again, I'm just holding my stylus over the screen to make a note of where I'm supposed to be. Okay, muscles, boom, boom, boom. Here we go. Okay, and then I'm like, well, he's got a collar, right? So collar, 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 collar. Edge of neck. Edge of neck. Boom, 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 boom. And this is again, okay, let's do goatee. Goatee. And now as you get into finer and finer granularity of detail, the mistakes start to show up, right? You can see where you kind of got something in the wrong place. And, you know, I tend to guess pretty well. Ear. You see, you're almost scribbling it here. But what happens is it kind of starts to just appear. And by the way, the reason I did so many tweens, I did this many tweens because until I did it, I didn't have that fluid, smooth feeling that you get from full chain animations. So I'm like, well, I got to get more tweens in here. Well, how do we do it? And so I figured, well, let's try this. And so as you can see, it's already got that pretty smooth feeling to it, right? So I'm like, okay, now you can't do that all the time, and obviously blocking in the basic timing of your animation, pose to pose. So in other words, not just getting the poses right, but also the timing is pretty important. Having said that, another thing that I've found with Tahoma is that doing it on the fly is, how do I want to say this? There are some quirks about OpenTunes and Tahoma that are a little annoying. Like if I make a duplicate drawing here, all of a sudden okay, this is predicated on the idea that there's another drawing underneath it here. But what it does is it adds the tween or the new drawing, and what I would prefer is the way Krita works, where whatever you put in here prevails until the next drawing appears. But that's not what Tahoma does. What it does is it puts in the new drawing and then assumes you want the very next drawing to be the previous one, which I don't think I've maybe ever had a single case where that was what you really wanted. So what I always have to do is I have to hit delete and then fill in empty cells. It's not a big deal. It's an extra step you have to take. But anyway, so basically there you go. This is precisely all I did. Okay, and with the eyes, I kind of said, well, here's the eye line. Okay. Okay. Looks like, okay, so there's a little bit of a sin. The head is straight up here, and it almost feels like it's tilting back in the other direction. So that's a bit of a problem. So, and a lot of it, I would just make the dots. And the thing is, again, working at 12 frames per second, it does seem to be more forgiving of the differences in the drawings. And frankly, all these tweens were not finished out with the level of detail that the key poses were. But that's an example. It's a luxury we don't really have on a show like Salt and Light, where you're working at 8 frames a second. Is you don't have that latitude to kind of let the speed that the animation is flying by sort of hide the fact that you've got these little sloppy areas. And obviously there's really no excusing sloppiness anyway. I mean, so how you did that 3D rotation? Now, you talking about when it spins around? That was no. Again, this is okay. This gets back to exactly what I was saying. The how forgiving it is. Let me go back to this. I've covered that tweening methodology, so we'll just kind of leave that as it is. If you want to see it one last time, there you go. Blah blah blah. You can see it's pretty smooth, you know. But I would say for most of you guys, having another layer where you actually draw the arcs and all on one cell, so that then you just have to go in and break it up into individual frames, is probably a better way to work. But okay, so let's go back and address Dead Pianist's question. I think what we have here is this. Are you talking about this, Dead Pianist? Are you referring to this? Can you please weigh in and tell me yes if that's what you're talking about? If this is what Dead Pianist is talking about, I want to tell you that this is where operating at 12 frames per second is really forgiving. So I think this is okay. The answer is sloppy as hell. I mean, that's the answer. Just as sloppy as can be. But it all goes by so fast you don't really care, I think. And again, I want to qualify that. You could always take the time to make it better, right? And it's often worth doing so. So I don't want to, cast aspersions on doing quality work. But if you look at what's actually here, the tweening here absolutely makes no sense. That really probably should have been redrawn, frankly, because it works better with this one. But there's kind of a, I guess it's a grimace. So it's just sloppy as can be. It's as sloppy as can be. It's horrible, actually. It's horrible. But at high speed, we have some latitude for that. It's a wonderful trade-off. It's a wonderful natural balancing act between the level of detail and time you have to put into it versus how long it's on the screen. So it's pretty simple. The stuff that's going to be on the screen a long time, you better make sure it looks right. So you can afford to be a bit sloppy with the tweens, only reworking them if they don't work in movement. If there was an easy way to color without having to close off lines, that would be great. Full chain animation, I will say this. If you're doing it in, this is the way I used to do it oftentimes in Krita. So, but if you're going to do it in Tahoma, then this is what I would suggest you might want to try. Go in and create a vector level. And then use these options: auto close, auto group, and auto fill. Just when you go to auto create a cell, make sure you draw a shape. Don't just click a dot to create a new cell, because you will cause Tahoma to crash. But basically, you just go like this now. And so for the kind of thing you're doing, and then of course you can parametrically change the color. So if I was wanting the rapid coloring technique over a pencil test type animation, this is how I'd do it. Put it on a vector level. And you can kind of do it in pieces if you want, like that. So no big deal. One might ask, hey Dave, why didn't you do that for your thing? I have no excuse, people. I have no excuse. And by the way, if you do that, right, exactly. That is completely right. So to finish what I was going to say is that if you do it this way and you're trying to move fast, use this option right here as well, called draw under. If you do like that, any subsequent shapes you draw will be placed under the ones you already drew, which means you can be even sloppier with your color. See, I'm overlapping like crazy, but it's all placed underneath. So that's a pretty fast way to deal with coloring stuff in and adding a little bit of punch to a pencil test animation very quickly. So hopefully that helps. Okay, so we are at 30 minutes, so I'm going to shift gears. I kind of showed the tweening thing. I'm trying to be a little more concise and compact here, especially on live streams, because I do have a tendency to ramble. And I hope you guys have found this useful. So there's two more things we're going to cover. One is from my Spiral Notebook today, and the question is why YouTube is a really, really great platform. And I want to share these ideas because they may inform some of you guys in terms of what you're doing with your own YouTube channel. I want to say one more thing about this, though. One of my goals, I just kind of wanted to say this, and I really want to say it to you guys because this is something that it's one of those personal little thought kind of things. One of my goals here was to create something that literally drew attention to someone else. Okay? And so for various reasons I picked full chain animation to pick on, right? But I thought, if I do my job well and sort of water someone else's garden a little tiny bit, I'll bet you that's going to water my garden too. And the result so far has been exactly that. It's obviously, really positive response. It's clear that people want this kind of content. And it's not very expensive to create in terms of the time. It's something you can do in a day. So, at least, well, I can do it in a day, and maybe you can or maybe you can't. But usually with content, by definition, if it's really short, then it's not going to take a zillion years to create. So, anyway, so yeah, I wanted it to be something that contributed something to the community in some way that I thought would be useful, and I think I succeeded in that. So anyway, enough about that. Okay, discard the changes, quit anyway. That's that. Okay, so Right, and if I'm looking at Full Chain's last comment, that's right. And so now I have a choice. I can recap this stuff about YouTube as a platform, which is what I think I'll do. But first, I'm going to give you guys a little teaser. Okay, I'm going to give you a little teaser what comes in the next topic. So maybe I'll try to take roughly a half an hour for each of these. Okay, so I want you to watch this. And there you can see Bo of the fifth column is queued up next. I like Bo. He's a pretty good guy. Okay, so here, check this out. This is about 30 seconds.
I'm Natalie Weiss from Healed by Grace and Healed by Grace 2, which you can watch free here on Encourage TV.
And I'm David Matthew Weiss,
My dad.
writer and director of Healed by Grace 1 and 2.
Be sure to...
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Be sure to smash the red subscribe button to support family-friendly entertainment and to find out about new releases here on Encourage TV.
And check out blendedplanet.com to see what we've been up to.
An original animated adventure series called Salt and Light.
Okay, so that's a 30-second promo I created for the Encourage TV YouTube channel, and they, they've got 600,000 subscribers. So, what a great opportunity to do the same thing I just mentioned about Full Chain Animation, which is draw some attention, help them achieve their goals, and in doing so, maybe that helps me achieve my goals. I think it's a mindset that has a lot of power behind it here on YouTube and among us as a little sort of virtual community, right? And so what I was going to do in the third part of today's live stream is look at the making of, or sort of the breakdown on what was involved in creating that promo video, because that is actually one of the reasons I wasn't live streaming this week, is because I needed to create that promo. And of course, Encourage TV is a YouTube channel that is run by the company that distributes my live action films. And so this was just an idea we came up with because when I was talking about crowdfunding, their feeling was they didn't want to directly promote a crowdfund for a property that they're not yet even distributing, right? Technically, it's not real yet because it's not done and it's not out there. Once it's out, they'd be more prone to promote that, because the more successful and well supported my product is, the more its reach expands, and then they sell more product, and so they're more successful, and that helps make me more successful. So hey, Art with AMRB, how you doing, brother? How are things up in Chicago? Probably kind of hot like they are down here in Fort Wayne, I imagine. So anyway, let's get to the Spiral Notebook. So this is I'm going to actually more or less duplicate this, okay? Because it's what I actually do when I'm journaling on paper. Okay, so here we go. So this is the topic: the Spiral Notebook. And when I'm journaling, what I'll do is I'll just I actually have these colored pencils, red and blue, that I go like this, and so the topic is why YouTube, and we may find that writing this stuff down takes too long, but I'll try. So why YouTube is a great platform. So there's some philosophical things about it. It's interesting, back in the day, before I actually started making films, but I was basically doing dog sports coverage and corporate video, okay, with a partner. Oops. Sorry about that. And I remember talking to him because we were getting into the idea of making a movie. We just kind of thought, yeah, it'd be cool. Let's do that. And I remember back then talking to him about where I thought things were going in the media space. And we're talking about 12 years ago, 13 years ago probably. And the thing I told him was that I had strong feelings that the content we were creating, he had a much more optimistic view of the reach of the content that we were creating in the dog sports world. It was both event coverage and it was also edutainment, where you'd have like training videos and things like that. And I remember we got in this long conversation where I said, now what's going to happen is you're going to have these smaller and smaller and smaller niches, or niches, I guess is the proper term, of content. And in fact, that's how it should be, is that you create this niche content. And then if what you find is that you're not drawing an audience, then you need to make the content broader to try to reach a larger audience. And if the opposite happens, if you find you're getting too broad of a reach and it's a little too scatterbrained, then you chop it up into sub-channels, if you will, that have a narrower focus. And the really interesting thing about it is, again, this was a conversation we were having way back before YouTube was a thing. And the reality is YouTube is exactly what I was describing back then, for the following reasons. Okay, so here's why I think YouTube is actually quite an amazing platform. And I'm going to go ahead and switch to this brush so it's a little easier to see. Number one, okay, it's democratic. And what I mean by democratic is not in the political sense, but in the sense that you can talk about hashtags and descriptions and thumbnails, and all those skills are important to implement or roll into your YouTubing. But at the end of the day, it pretty much is a search engine, and frankly, it is my conviction that it is democratic. Usually, I look at it this way: if your content isn't drawing, it's probably because it sucks, and if your content doesn't suck, it'll probably find an audience. Okay, so here my audience is very small because I haven't really, on the one hand, done much to expand it. Doing more short content should help with that, because that's becoming more important to me now. So the other thing about it here is that it's free-ish, meaning the cost of entry is pretty low. It's not totally low, because there's an educational cost of entry, and then in some cases there's some equipment involved. But the other thing about it being democratic is what I call discoverable. Okay, so in other words, what it takes to be good at it can be readily found out. It's not like some big secret. Again, dealing with hashtags and description and all that are enormously important if you want to have your content discovered. But in terms of you as a creator, you have the ability to learn how to do this. I'm in the process of improving myself in terms of, getting better at using the tool that I have at my disposal in an intelligent way. Okay, number or letter C is, unlike many businesses, and when I said free-ish, what I mean by that is you can actually start today with your phone, right? Okay, so unlike a lot of businesses, you do have this rapid response in terms of feedback and in terms of analytics, where this is the business person's dream, is the business where you can know immediately if you're succeeding or not, right? And it's an amazing change in the media space, because back in the day, we had an extremely high cost of entry, and a much smaller number of channels, networks, platforms, whatever, in order, available to get your content into. Basically, you had 4 channels on TV, back in the day. And so having essentially an infinite number of available channels or platforms, combined with the ability to have quick analytics on whether something's working or not, is really amazing, because then you can choose to respond or not. As I said with this channel, I've said many times here, is I've made no effort whatsoever to draw a wide audience. My live stream content, which has been the lion's share of my content for the last year or so, is designed for a very, very small audience, which is basically you guys, right? The short animation scene is a trend slave, though. Yes. Well, and that's where All Tomorrows, I want to do something with All Tomorrows, too. I think it's kind of interesting. Let me say this, Full Chain. The ultimate, this is kind of my progressive side talking. When I talk about, the ultimate business, I guess it might be my more conservative entrepreneurial side, and then I've got my more progressive leftist kind of side. I think that in a perfect world, what would happen is we would all be able to be tuned into where we each have strengths, and we would in fact be helping one another by offsetting our weaknesses. And I want to disagree with actually, Max. I won't say I disagree with what you just said, because the rules do change. But when I wrote this in my journal, what I actually wrote, it was why YouTube is a great platform despite all the complainers. And that's really how I look at it. Because if you look at what we had to deal with, probably, I don't know how old you are, Max, but if you look at what we had to deal with in terms of being able to play in this sandbox, even 10 years ago or earlier, what we have today is a dream. And frankly, I think YouTube is actually doing a really good job of balancing it out. And I think YouTube Shorts are a really, really good addition. Obviously, they're trying to compete with TikTok. I mean, clearly. But as an addition to the platform that feeds into a couple of the other things I'm about to say, it's really the right move. Okay? So that brings us to D, is you can stagger your content. That's what I did by creating a short yesterday. The people that are going to watch that short are not the people who are going to come to this live stream. There will be overlap because the people who come to the live stream are probably going to watch the short. Okay? But we have the ability to stagger our content, short, medium, and long. So, you can use a short to just give someone a really compact teaser about what you're about or what you have to offer, and then maybe that will cause them to take an interest in your longer form content. And that is as it should be. It's my responsibility as a creator to not be so stupid. I'm the one who's been stupid. Hey, Tom Doing Art. Okay, so if I don't create something for YouTube Shorts in order to expand my reach, that's my fault. That gets back to this word. This is democratic. Generally speaking, if I fail here, it is not because YouTube changed their rules. If I fail here, it's because I haven't done my job. Okay, that's my strong conviction. Okay, so you can stagger your content. So a short, like I posted yesterday, would be one thing. Medium would be something I already have queued up, which is that I took this short that I did yesterday, and I've already got a video editing timeline that is about a 6 to 8 minute speed paint of, many hours of work. And then, of course, there's your long form content. Now, the interesting thing about being able to stagger your content is that if you have the brains to do so, then what it does is it feeds this. It feeds the funnel. You guys have probably heard of this, the idea of a marketing funnel. Because not only do you have the ability to bring people from here to here to here, but you also have the ability very naturally to say, well, maybe this is going to be premium content. Maybe this is going to be something people pay for, right? Or whatever. You can choose your own plan, but the point is you have the ability to do so, which is awesome. Okay? E is kind of a... I keep hitting the wrong button. E is kind of just an observation, is that this is what people do. Okay? Salt and Light may be successful. Okay? It may reach a pretty wide audience, actually. It could happen. It may grab as a cultural phenomenon. Yeah, I kind of doubt it, but it could happen. But let me tell you something. In the long run, people aren't spending all their time watching long-form TV shows. You know, we kind of went from watching what is available when it's on to binge watching, and then in concert with that development over time, over basically the last 10 to 15 years, is you got also this gravitation towards extremely short-form content, hence the success of platforms like TikTok. You can bitch about it if you want to, but the reality is this is what people do. This is how they spend their time. So either if you're gonna deal with YouTube as a platform, and then so this is me talking to myself, by the way, people. If you're gonna deal with YouTube as a platform, get over it. Get over yourself. It's not just about what you like. If you want to actually monetize it or turn it into some sort of business or long-term viable platform for yourself. And again, in that respect, YouTube is amazing. Here they've got this incredible open platform where you can do almost anything. Almost. And in effect, it becomes your platform. So if your platform isn't giving you the result that you want, then what are you doing wrong? Because you're probably doing something wrong. So, okay. Now, and by the way, when it comes to business, I will say this too. There is a balance here. The goal isn't to have necessarily 20 million subscribers, or in other words, my goal and your goal might be really different. Okay? Yeah, I agree with you, Amar. It's just this. You can do, like I said, whatever you want, pretty much however you want. If it grabs, it grabs. Again, I say it this way: if it grabs, it's probably because it doesn't suck, and if it fails, it's probably because it does. Now, what sucks about it could come back to some of the analytics-driven aspects of a channel. So in other words, my channel might suck because the core content might be fine, but I didn't do a good thumbnail, I didn't do a good headline, I didn't do a good description, I didn't do good hashtags, and so it might be the execution that sucks, not the content. That's absolutely a strong possibility. It's a little tragic. There's probably some really good content out there that nobody's finding. Right? I'm not talking about my channel. I'm just talking about in general. And it is what it is. And we all have to play. Again, it's democratic. We all have to play in the same sandbox. So how can you complain about that? There's never been a better opportunity. So what's F? F is what I just said. Any topic is fair game. Like, whatever you're into. The funny thing about doing a short, actually, for me, is that it is, in fact, what I prefer. You know? I've always preferred short-form content because I'm an artsy-fartsy guy. I'm a right-brain kind of guy with a really short attention span. Hence my, there have been live streams I've done that have been 5 or 6 hours, but generally, after a couple hours, I'm ready to take a break and shift gears. Yeah, and that's a good point there, Full Chain, for sure. Okay, so, and then G speaks back to being democratic, I suppose, in that it's open to all comers. It doesn't matter how old you are. Whether you're rich, poor, whether you're from, the Philippines, or whether you're from, the Bible Belt of the U.S. of A. Doesn't matter. Everybody's playing in the same sandbox. Now, let me go back here. I want to go a little deeper here, and some of you guys, I think, will appreciate this. When you talk about any topic as fair game, I want to expand on that a little bit, okay? So let's jump down here. Okay, so now this speaks specifically to my channel, and let's just look at this. Let's look at the contrast between appeal and value. Okay, this is an important thing to understand, especially if you have a niche content channel, okay, because you got to understand this. Again, I want to emphasize, I cannot be called a successful YouTuber, okay? I am a successful business person. I am a successful, I'm a successful filmmaker. I mean, you could kind of go down a list of things I've done successful at, but YouTube isn't one of them. Okay, so a lot of what I am sharing here isn't to say, look, I've played this out to the nth degree to discover that it's what works. Not the case. Rather, it's saying, look, there are things about how the world works that I figured out a long time ago, and it just happens that YouTube fits very elegantly into what would be the perfect business opportunity if you choose to do something with it, right? Okay, so here's the difference between appeal and value. This is a very important thing to understand. Okay, appeal is going to be content that's going to have many views, large audience, and low value. Okay? In other words, watching the video is it. You get it? In other words, this is the stuff that has 20 million views and makes you laugh, let's say. On TikTok or a YouTube short or something like this. Zillions of views, large audience, low value. In other words, it's any idiot can appreciate a short, funny video. Okay, so there's nothing exclusive about the content. Now, there may be a lot of creativity that goes into creating it. There may be a lot of technical skill that goes into creating it. But in terms of the audience's experience, it's a low-value proposition. They're going to watch it for 20 seconds and then they're done. And they're on to the next one, right? So what is a higher value? I mean, what is value as opposed to appeal? Well, high-value content, by contrast, would tend to have fewer views. It's going to have a niche audience. And it's going to have high value. So here when I refer to value, I'm referring to earning power. On a per unit basis, unit being whatever the core product is that we're revolving our monetization around. In this case, it would be a video. It could be a collection of videos. It grows into maybe a lot of videos, but at the end of the day, we're talking about a video. Okay? So here, it basically begins and ends with watching it. Here, premium content makes sense. Now you can actually turn this high appeal content into premium content as well by doing this, by staggering the content, by having short content like a marketing funnel feed the medium form content, feed the long form content, where there may be offers along the way for things that people want to maybe pay for. And you don't have to be selling something, because it could be that you just embrace the idea that by moving people through the funnel, I just get a lot more views. There's a lot more advertising dollars, and so I just make more money just from views. That's perfectly fine. There's a million ways to do it. Okay? So the difference here is the money comes from views, and here the money comes from value-added content. So this is DarrenT's OpenTunes course, is value-added content. He's doing fine with his YouTube channel, but basically it's a low-volume channel with high niche content, right? Very few people, in the big scheme of things, actually care about the deep nuts and bolts of how to use a tool like OpenTunes. This is why I don't have that many subscribers or a large audience, is because based on the content, those are the only people that would want to watch it. Either that or people who, I think, Maria, it might be safe to say, somebody like you appreciates what I'm doing right now, where I'm sort of taking my, the lessons I've learned in the world and bringing it to the audience that also cares about animation. Okay? So there's a little appeal in my channel that is a sidestep away from the animation topic, right? I disagree with Amar's statement. Amar, I'm gonna make a strong statement here. If you really believe what you just wrote, okay, and I believe you do because you've made other comments like that in the past, okay. And as a guy that's been in business for myself for 30 years, who's worked at home for 30 years, who has commercial media clients all over the country, you know, I've done a few things in my life. If you believe what you just wrote, then you've got limits to what you can do and achieve, and they're completely self-imposed. Because what you just said, there's a direct argument between what you just said and many of these points. Rapid response being the big one. You don't have to know. You do not have to know. You just have to try. Okay? You don't have to know. That's a truism. You don't have to know. You have to try. And then when you try, you look at the analytics, you look at the feedback, and you say, well, did this work or did this not work? And if you really believe that you have to know, then what you're really saying, as far as I'm concerned, is that you're either not willing, or you're afraid, or you're not quite capable yet of trying. Okay? That's my opinion. It's a strong statement, but I disagree really strongly with that last comment. I get where it's coming from, and in the end of the day, the problem with your comment is the word first. That's the problem. Okay? Correct. Now you're more on the track I'm talking about. That's right. That's exactly right. I mentioned this in, I think, my last live stream, is you could create 2 YouTube channels with 2 different titles and literally post the same video on both channels with completely different thumbnails, different headlines, different descriptions, the whole deal. Well, of course, in A/B testing, it's better to only change one thing between the 2 that you're comparing. But absolutely, yeah. So the problem is, you do not first have to know. What you have to do is try and then discover. Again, we're back to this discoverability. By trying, you discover, and it's very safe to do so. Why? Because of C. You're going to know within a few days if you've got content that's grabbing, right? So anyway, sorry for the, I'm not trying to excoriate you here, publicly, but I definitely wanted to, if my son made that statement, I'd pin him to the wall and say, no, kid, you've got to try first before you assume that this is viable or this isn't. And the cool thing is, this is where I say it comes back to this point of being open to all comers. The problem with creative people, and I've been guilty of this as anybody, the problem with creative people is that we love stuff. There's stuff we love, okay? Whether it's art or music or whatever. And we love it so much that we are scared that if we actually tried to do what we really, really love, okay, not just dance around the edges of it, but really go with 100% what we really love, then what's going to happen is we're going to be shamed, we're going to be embarrassed, we're going to be humiliated, and we're going to fail. And the problem is that comes from a place in your psychology that is not healthy, and that voice is not useful in any way, shape, or form. The only time or place that voice would be useful is if you were considering doing something that is so enormously expensive that it will ruin you if it fails. Okay? Then the voice of caution makes sense. Other than that, forget it. Forget it. Go for it. It's open to all comers. Whatever you think is cool, probably someone else does too. Okay? And when I made that short yesterday, trust me, guys, I wanted to make something that deep down inside is what I think's cool. I love seeing that kind of stuff. It's why I wanted to celebrate what full chain animation is doing. is because I think it's awesome, right? Okay, so maybe let me keep going here. Okay, so I actually made a list of things that, for me, if I was going to continue going down this road, what are some things that I could do if I was starting from scratch? Okay, believe it or not, obviously animation is on the list. Okay, let's talk about, music. I know a lot about music. I've produced, go on Spotify and look up Natalie Weiss. Go on Spotify and look up Natalie Weiss. If you have Spotify or YouTube Music, look up Natalie Weiss. You're going to find, at least on Spotify, you're going to find 2 albums where all of the music was essentially written by me. And it's all kinds of different styles. And I've done, musical jingles in a million different styles, and I've scored 8 movies. So there's a lot I know about music. Well, code. Okay? For me, and again, there's so many hours in the day. You're not going to do all these things tomorrow, right? Because there's so many hours in a day. Okay, but for me, code, well, I program in at least 8 different programming languages. Right? From JavaScript to C++ to, Pascal, Euphoria. There are others, okay? The topic of psycho-emotional health. I've been on an 8-year odyssey exploring why we do the things we do. And the little diatribe I gave a moment ago about why we as creative people are hesitant to just do what we really love, as opposed to, like I said, dancing around the edges of it. Doing what's safe instead of doing what we really love. It's a big factor, because it steals years from your life if you let those voices of negativity be strong in your life. And at the end of the day, nobody's responsible but you. It's your choice to listen to those voices or to fight against them. It's hard. It's extremely hard. It's really, really real. I could create a channel that's all about being a success coach. And by the way, let me back up here, just because, as I say, I've run a small business, that's done just fine for decades. And my area of expertise has always had to do with looking at a thing, and being able to ferret out what matters and what doesn't, given that usually the stuff that everybody else thinks matters often doesn't. Okay, that's just a thing. But what I was going to say is, if we come back here, if you said, okay, Dave, if you were going to look at your channel with your very, very small number of subscribers, and you said, what would be the premium content that would actually make sense for you? It would probably actually have something to do with this. It would have to do with getting really one-on-one with someone who's really trying to do something, probably in the animation space, and working with them closely to dial it in, especially with animated. There's probably a lot of people that are really into animation, but are kind of challenged maybe when it comes to writing stories or scripts. Might be challenged when it comes to editing. There's a lot of pieces of the puzzle other than just the animation that go into making something bigger than just a short animation. So anyway, another thing would be this Akari. This as a YouTube exclusive anime is an absolutely viable product. Obviously, there's Salt and Light. I could create a YouTube channel called Fit After 50. Definitely could do that. I've been pumping iron for since New Year's Day 1983, and I think it served me well. The Fan Futurama. You guys can do this. Now, you guys should do this. If you want to. If you want to try to expand your reach or figure out what you really care about and what you'd really want to kind of chase that rabbit of trying to do more on YouTube, you guys maybe should make a list like this too. Writing. I mean, I've written at least 10,000 scripts. Commercials, obviously movies. And normally I've had pretty good writers tell me that my input helped them a lot. Let's put it that way. Budget filmmaking. Now this is the thing I know how to do that nobody. There are like 5 people in the country that know how to make a film that's as good as possible for as cheap as possible. And then we could go on and on and on. But I mean, consider making a list like that, you guys, and say, and this is, again, it's only if you want to. If you don't care about, developing a business or a YouTube channel or whatever it is, then don't do it. Don't do it because I said so. That's a stupid reason to do it. Do it because you want to. So anyway, that's it. I'm going to erase this, call it good. I'm going to just discard that and move on to the third topic. Okay? Now I'm going to take half a second here and look at the chat. Okay, so the stuff that matters in music. Okay. All right, I'm going up a little bit, guys, so bear with me. I'm going to give myself about 2 minutes to just scan through the comments here. Tiny Salad, welcome, by the way. Max, I think I said welcome to you. I can't remember. Okay. Grows a base of interest and you become a known figure around that community. I don't care about that dude. Hey, I assume that's... okay, so you're reacting to what I said about first knowing if the product's viable. Top of list. Okay, so failure and anything else is not the case for me. The real issue for me is supplementing my income. And okay, so Amar's making a super good point. I mean, this is a real. I've talked about it a little bit here before. It's really, really, for a lot of people, it is super challenging to balance, all this lovey-dovey stuff about chasing your dreams and the fact that they have bills to pay. That's a real problem, and point taken, Amar. It's a very good point, and it's hard. I relate to it from, I didn't have a pot to piss in 1991, and it was tough. When I started my business, I was also selling essentially cable TV door to door for quite a while in order to get by, and it was hard. And it is also true that it was only when I quit that job and there was something that changed in me in about November of 1991, October, November of 1991, where I said, I can't work for the man anymore. I can't. I won't do it. I cannot do it. I have to chart my own path. I have to succeed. And I can honestly say it was not until I crossed that threshold where there was no option, and I quit the door-to-door selling job until I made that absolute, there is no way in hell I'm going to fail decision, and then gave it 100%, that my fortunes started to turn. So, all right. So I know I did excoriate you to a degree, Amar, based on that earlier comment. So I want to take my time here and really look at your comments, because I want to take your view of my opinion fully into consideration. Making sure I develop that engine that allows me to jump 100% into doing our animation, comics, and game development. Yes. Yep. How you do that, it's going to be different for every person. Does this end with Dave accepting a job at a company, filling out reports, managing a team, hanging with the coworkers at events? Well, that's a really good question, Tom. When I started my I'll go to the big screen here since I'm so beautiful and you guys love to look at me. So I think I'm answering your question. When I started my company, which was providing commercial media services, I had a close friend who had been my employer actually up in Michigan who was developing the same business. Basically, we're both doing the same thing. I had not thought that I wanted to do sales, believe it or not. And I took a job down here in Indiana. The job only lasted 5 months. It was at a jingle company, producing jingles, musical jingles for radio. And I really oversold my way into that job. I really wasn't ready for the pace or a lot of the work that was involved. And so what I learned was that my friend developed a dealer network. He grew the business in a way that I didn't. I chose to keep it small. I had employees over the years, but basically what worked for me was looking at what I could do essentially by myself and then finding ways to optimize the production process, and again ferreting out things that were important versus not important to my customers in order to not waste my time on stuff people don't really care about, right? And so I was a really early adopter, for example, of digital audio. I even wrote an application with Visual Basic, believe it or not, back in the day, that recorded voiceovers for me and then interspersed them with clips of music, that type of thing. For me, the job at the company, there has to be a real good value proposition to justify a group dynamic. And for a lot of things, there's no option. For a lot of businesses, you can't do it all yourself. But we're talking about the media space, and in the media space, you pretty much can. So, okay, let's see here. I know the opportunities are there, but splitting your time up into what you need to do. Well, I think that's true, and not you, Amar, but I mean, we people, the greatest enemy, especially when you're over 50, actually is just tiredness. Believe it or not. Like, and you drink a beer or you eat a little too much or whatever, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm sleepy or whatever. And that's actually one of the biggest impediments nowadays is just energy, right? Energy, it's really important. You have to protect your energy. Stability versus ambition. I work full-time during the day, but at a job I completely 5 o'clock I can go on to theater stuff, which doesn't pay, but which I love. Yep, that's really common scenario. So, tried making such lists. They usually end up rather short, though. Yeah, it's normally, I think, probably better for most people to have a very short list and do something with something on the list as opposed to, like, for me, it's really easy to make really long lists. And then you just got sort of the psycho-emotional struggle of looking at the list the next day and realizing, oh my God, now I feel shamed if I don't actually make progress on each of these things. And so you can create a real negative situation for yourself. Definitely Tom is correct. First step, manage your expenses. Yep. So basically homeless for about 4 years. If I didn't have the few friends, I would have been living out of my car. Yeah, it's rough, man. Starving artist thing is very real, but I know it was 100% on me because even before the internet, I was my best salesperson, but I never got out and met people and really marked myself. Yep. Well, the advantage you have today, Amar, is everything I was talking about YouTube in that you have a better opportunity now than ever before to chart your own path all by yourself. And I think in that sense, there's never been a better time to be doing sort of. Yeah. Well, Full Chain, are you willing to tell us how old you are? I'm curious. You don't have to. I'll go first. I am 54 years old. going to be 55 in October. So if full chain, if you're willing to say so, I'll but you don't have to. Okay, so over on this screen, what I'm going to do is, and frankly, speaking of the tiredness thing, I actually think I'm going to cut the live stream short. I don't know if I'm going to do this. You guys can tell me if you want me to, I guess. But okay, so here is the promo video that I spent, about 2 or 3 days this week I spent shooting and editing for the Encourage TV YouTube channel. So I'm going to play that, and then I'll go to the timeline to show you guys some of the things that I dealt with and some of the challenges. I thought he was around our age, Amar, but okay. All right, so anyway, here we go. Oh, come on now. Go back. Load it up. Here we go.
I'm Natalie Weiss from Healed by Grace and Healed by Grace 2, which you can watch free here on Encourage TV.
And I'm David Matthew Weiss,
My dad.
writer and director of Healed by Grace 1 and 2. Be sure to... Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Be sure to smash the red subscribe button to support family-friendly entertainment and to find out about new releases here on Encourage TV.
And check out blendedplanet.com to see what we've been up to.
An original animated adventure series called Salt and Light.
Thank you, Amar. Okay, actually, and I'm kind of glad that happened. I'll jump to it here, but I want to say something about this. Tom made a very good point when he says that tiredness is a symptom of depression. That is true, and that's one of the things that I've worked very hard to grok out. I think there's so much I could say about this. This is why I almost feel like I should start another channel about psycho-emotional health, because a lot of what we call depression, what we label as depression, I could go back just a couple days in my journals and look at a lot of thoughts I had about this. But here's the deal. To quote Joe Biden, I guess. What we label depression is looking back at a situation and a condition in a human being that, of course, we can find biochemical markers. It might not be as clear as we might think about what are the... Now, I'll get to that in a moment, full chain, okay? Okay. I'll get to this. Here it is. I'm going to refresh it.
I'm Natalie.
Okay, so I'll play it here in half a second, but I want to make this point. Okay. And I guess it actually speaks to full chain animation. What you're doing right now here on YouTube is very, very correct. Very right. Because what we call depression oftentimes is lack of motion. It's actually stillness, not in a good way, that comes from fear. We get conditioned to certain negative outcomes that we then are conditioned to be cautious of and hesitant. And what's interesting is that a lot of times when we move, but we move very, very slowly. Just in other words, it's really interesting because psycho-emotionally, you think about it, what would it be like if you set your expectations really, really low? Okay, the old saying, if all else fails, lower your standards, right? Well, what if you set your expectations really, really low, where you said, if I just get up and move, if I were only just to walk across the room, I'm going to celebrate that. Like, that's an accomplishment. I feel good about that. Okay, that sounds stupid, right? That's crazy. But if you truly believed that was a cause for celebration, then you'd be happy. Okay? So now if you follow this through to its logical conclusion, it would turn out that the least amount of motion would potentially garner the maximum amount of happiness, which is really interesting, because then when you think about what people are striving for when they meditate and whatnot, in essence, that stillness in yourself. In other words, anxiety is gone, fear is gone, but yet you're content to just be still. Okay, if you could do that, this is a big if, right? But the question is, if that were true, then what you'd find is the very thing that sort of Eastern practitioners talk about, this idea of stillness and emptying your mind, actually becomes a wonderfully happy place. Why? Because being still as a minimum of motion becomes the actual gauge of having success. And the interesting thing about it is, from that place, all of a sudden you find with peace that you have the energy and the enthusiasm to go ahead and go try something. Whereas under the auspices of expectation, fear of failure, perhaps shame, if you're talking about expressing or showing who you really are, what you really love, what you care about, that's dangerous, right? That's not safe. Well, the dynamics of that are very, very conducive to what we call depression. I'm not saying that clinical depression isn't a thing, okay? But what I'm saying is that sometimes just moving helps. There's a lot of other things, you know. I mean, there's community and blah, 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 blah. So, and I think Tom just alluded to that. Local art communities can give you that room of people looking at your work. Yep. Well, and the other thing is, a lot of it comes to your mindset, because you say, look, the best mindset about potential failure is this. If I'm possibly going to fail, if I'm afraid I'm going to fail, then what I want to do is I want to fail as quickly and as spectacularly as possible for two reasons. Number one, I get numb to the fear of it. I get numb to it being a concern. And number two, I get some feedback that lets me say, okay, here's maybe what I could do different and try again. So if you are afraid of failure, you want to fail as spectacularly and as quickly as possible, which is a great thing. It's kind of a self-balancing deal, because what that means is whatever it is you're afraid to fail at, you know, don't spend a month on it, spend a day on it, and just throw it out there and go for it, right? And you know, get the bad news as quickly as possible would be my advice. Okay, get the bad news as quickly as you can. Okay, so now we're at 1 hour and 30 minutes, and I'm going to go back to this. Okay, so this is what I did this week.
I'm Natalie Weiss from Healed by Grace and Healed by Grace 2, which you can watch free here on Encourage TV.
And I'm David Matthew Weiss,
My dad.
writer and director of Healed by Grace 1 and 2.
Be sure to...
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Be sure to smash the red subscribe button to support family-friendly entertainment and to find out about new releases here on Encourage TV.
And check out blendedplanet.com to see what we've been up to.
An original animated adventure series called Salt and Light.
Okay, so two things. Number one, whoops. In case anybody actually read this down here, this YouTube channel, Myth Vision, this guy, quite an interesting guy. He's live now, but he was raised and lived as an evangelical Christian most of his life, and now I don't know if you'd say he's gone atheist, but he's definitely leaning in that direction. But I tell you, I find his ideas and arguments to be very, very compelling and interesting and very well balanced. So yeah, I just mentioned that because it's kind of there and maybe somebody noticed it. So anyway, all right, let's get rid of that. So this was cool because the script I wrote for this cartoon, or this, well, okay, I said cartoon, so let me dovetail into something. At the end of this video, what was actually supposed to happen was there's a wipe, and Natalie and I actually turn into Mel and Tianara, and it was supposed to be Mel and Tianara that said the final line of dialogue. So I pat myself on the back for this one. In that, I spent a fair amount of time creating that animation, but when I cut it into the promo, it just wasn't as good. I mean, when the voice over continued, but it just dissolved to the cartoon without the animated Mel and Tianara on the screen, it just felt better. And so I had the good sense to literally just remove it and say, you know what, even though I spent the time on it, I kind of wanted to show that if it doesn't serve the final product well, then my obligation is to jettison that element. Okay, so Max, can you expand here? You kind of need to meditate before filming things like this one. I don't have any idea what you're talking about. What are you referring to? Okay, and I'm going to go back, but before I dive into this, I'm going to go back and look at a couple of these comments here. If rewarding by fans and peers, that's great, but seeing it finished, I'm really enjoying the fruits you learn. Yep. That would be what I would really want. Okay. Amar is making this is a very courageous comment, you guys. I think if I'm understanding you here, what Amar just admitted, and I feel the same way. It's why I'm glad I got a lot of views and attaboys on the video I posted yesterday. In truth, a lot of us deeply crave the recognition and respect of our peers. We want to be respected by the people we respect. That's totally normal and a very courageous thing to admit. It's actually an important driver and a positive driver, because if you don't seek out the people you respect, you'll do what I've done many times in my life, which is been more of a big fish in a small pond, where I can say, look at what I can do, but the reality is that the people that are really good and better than me, I actually haven't sought out that much, and you can cast it in a positive light, or try to, from the standpoint of saying, well, I'm all self-taught or whatever, But the reality is that I've avoided being competitive to quite some degree over the years, and I think that was a mistake. So another thing is, the older you get, you can develop a pack rat of ideas or children in your head, and of all the ideas or IPs you spawn. It doesn't even include all the other things you learn from life, the skills you learn. Kind of went that route myself. It's true. That's why I said that probably for a lot of people the list should be short, because, and I think I've said this when you I think you made a comment months ago about the 100 ideas that you had, and I was kind of like, well, just do one, just pick one, right? Generally, that's probably better, but I understand it. It can be overwhelming. Now we're back to the whole idea of psycho-emotional wellness. These things, especially for creative people, I think. So, Max, again, I have no idea what you meant by you need to meditate before filming things like this one. Are you talking about the Encourage TV promo? Or are you talking about this live stream? I have no idea. Okay, odd. I've latched onto listening to an atheist former evangelical, Bart Ehrman. I think I've heard of Bart. Not atheist, but I won't get into details. But life and vehicles are made to divide instead of bringing us together. Absolutely, Amar. Absolutely. When I look at the conflict in the socio-political conversation, the gridlock, if you will, the inability of people to share ideas and be disagreed with, frankly, as just an unhealthy emotional reaction is what it usually is. And there's this whole defensiveness thing. It's pretty detrimental, but if we and this comes back to psycho-emotional health from the standpoint of fear. Why do we want to defend our position, right, about what we believe? What are we afraid of? And when you abandon your prejudices, your biases, you abandon your fears, you refuse to be reactive, and you refuse to prop yourself up with some mythology or some story that you tell yourself about what's true. If you get rid of all that and you're dealing with someone who disagrees with you, what do you have left? Guess what? You have nothing left except to deal with the person in front of you. And so jettisoning, throwing away all of those stories that your parents, that you learned as a child or whatever, but not clinging to those as a way to put this shield of protection around yourself. When you stop doing that, you find that you actually have no choice but to deal with the person in front of you, which means you can actually connect with them. Guess what that means? That means that what Christians are saying they're all about, which you hear all over the place in evangelical circles, it's all about connecting. We're really just trying to connect. The reality is that a great deal about what we have believed as evangelical Christians, specifically and very demonstrably and provably, actually creates an environment where the one thing we say we're all about is exactly what we cannot do and will not do, which is to connect with people. It's only by getting rid of all of those edifices of belief, which become, of course, edifices of judgment. You can only actually connect with people when you get rid of all that and have the courage to be wrong. So, enough on that lecture. Okay, so Max, you said the promo, you looked kind of creepy at the end of it. Well, you know what? I'm going to tell you something, Max. I appreciate your comment there, but here's the deal. The client looked at the script and he had one word: perfect. 2-3 weeks later, the client looked at the final video and he had one word: perfect. Okay, so I actually agree with you to a degree. I expect that somewhere through here, you were looking at me where probably most people are going to be looking at Natalie, because she's the one talking. But I agree with you. You're Max, you're always very observant. And you're correct. Right about here, there's a spot
to support family-friendly entertainment and to find out about new releases here
where
on
I am
Encourage
just
And
looking
check out
agreeable
blendedplanet.com
and not saying anything, and it's a little tiny bit awkward. I feel that. Not enough to, be a problem, but your point is well taken. Okay, so, all right. As to who is, such rankings change over time, like physical abilities, time and age will factor in, as well as distractions. As to who is smarter, stronger, faster, better. Yeah, it depends on the flavor of the week. I mean, right now, I suppose whoever's the biggest and baddest in town is whoever's succeeding on TikTok, right? Tends to negate all of the work people put into things. What people don't want to do is the work and see that this person in front of them are the same. Okay, now this is interesting. What people don't want to do is people don't want to do is the work and see that this person in front of them are the same. You know what? This is really actually kind of deep crap, because it gets into my theory of everything, because believe it or not, I do have a theory of everything. If I were to read it to you guys, you'd probably be like, what the hell is he talking about? Let me say this. This is coming right out of the Spiral Notebook, by the way, from literally 3 days ago. About stillness. Well, this is what I wrote. Remember this when motivation wanes. A, move slowly, but move. B, view any movement as success. C, the ultimate movement is as little as possible. And D, therefore, stillness represents maximum success. Well, except that our heart still beats and we breathe. Okay? So I said, this is seen explicitly in bliss practice. The pinnacle is to achieve a bliss state by just deciding to and placing your attention. And then all you really experience, if your mind is quiet, is your heartbeat and your breath. So accomplishing nothing is success. Because being liberated from the desire to feel like you need to accomplish something is equivalent to freedom and joy, as Easterners say, removing attachments. The trick is to avoid the trap of seeing this liberty as a pathway to accomplishment. Think about that one. The trick is to avoid the trap of seeing this liberty as the pathway to accomplishment. In other words, if you can get quiet, get to where you're like not depressed, all of a sudden the fact that you're now succeeding at that becomes another voice telling you, okay, well, now you need to do something with that and accomplish something. It's a real danger. It is a pathway to accomplishment, but only as a side effect. If you expect and then attach to that outcome, poof, you lose. So you can have expectations in the sense that you have an intention that feeds action. Attachment is the danger because stupid says, number one, attach, but 2, don't act. And so 3, then be disappointed when the predictable occurs, which is nothing. So basically you get what you create. If you don't create it, you don't get it. So only stupid would find this disappointing. Stupid laments personal responsibility and cause and effect. I don't know if you guys followed that. When you get into the theory of everything, okay, I'm gonna throw this out there because you guys might find it funny. Okay, this is my meanderings. Yesterday, I think it was yesterday. Does the universe record or recall its state? Well, say, okay, I probably shouldn't read this because, see, there's a whole backdrop behind this. The thing is, I don't believe that there's such a thing as time. I do not believe in time. I actually believe that there's only motion. Okay, because everything's moving, and again, this could get into a long discussion. Everything is moving down to the atomic level, subatomic level, actually, the particle level. And everything's moving at the largest level, the universe level, right? So once you factor in the fact that you're on the Earth, which is rotating, then it's revolving around the sun, the solar system is revolving around the galaxies are revolving around a larger body of galaxies, I suppose, and then the whole universe is in motion. Once you add all those dimensions of motion, we are in fact moving millions of miles per second all the time. Okay? So because of inertia, we don't notice it, right? But for me, it does call into question something about the speed of light, because once you add all those dimensions of motion, the question is light keeping up, or is it somehow independent from it? So the question that has been asked for years is light a wave or a particle? I would say it probably is more like a particle, because apparently it's subject to inertia. Anyway, this turned into quite an interesting exploration where I was looking at, well, does the universe actually record its states? Because here's why. When I said I don't believe in time, look at it this way. Let's say there is no time. Let's say there's only motion. Okay, so now the universe is in a state, but everything's moving all the time, so you can't ever actually get an actual snapshot of a moment in time. Okay? You say light's independent, but that's just an opinion. I don't know that that's correct. Okay, but here's what I'm sure of. Is we have no mechanism to get a snapshot of the current actual state of things. In other words, if you could identify a point in space that doesn't move at all, it could be that 1 second later, using time as a useful metaphor, could be that 1 second later, the thing that would actually pass through that point in time might be literally on the other side of the universe. The universe is spinning and moving so fast that an actual fixed point in space would be capturing the motion of something that could be billions of miles apart, just 1 second later. Okay. So anyway, what's my point? My point is this. If you could get a snapshot of the current state of motion, which you can't, but if you could, is it not true that if later, as things are moving, if you could reproduce that same exact state of movement, is it not true that the story you would tell yourself to understand what you just experienced is that you went back in time? Because everything is literally in the same position as it was at this earlier point in time. Right? We know psychologically that we have a very strong proclivity to tell ourselves a story, to explain reality to ourselves. In fact, science has shown us that when somebody does a motion, it actually turns out that you initiate the motion before your conscious brain knows that you decided to do it. Right? And we also know that in the field of vision, about, I don't know what the number is, I think it's something like 40% of the time you're not seeing anything. Your brain reconstructs the story of what you're seeing and fills in the gaps. Okay? Therefore, what is time? Time is the story we tell ourselves to explain the motion that we've just experienced. Pretty deep stuff. Okay. So now I got a question, guys. Is it more fun to talk about these deep things, about Dave's theory of everything, or is it more fun to look at this video and ask ourselves about some of the challenges and problems I encountered along the way in trying to, the biggest challenge, by the way, being packing it into 30 seconds. I had to work really hard to get this down to 30 seconds. So, okay. Max says, light is independent of movement except of gravity. That's what science says. See, and by the way, the reason I actually got onto this was because of Amar's comment. Here's the deal, guys. Here's the deal about separation and connection and people and doing the hard work of being psycho-emotionally healthy and all this crap. Here's the deal. We are all connected. Okay? If you look at if you look at charge and you look at, when I drink water, okay, I drink a glass of water. The water literally becomes me. Okay, now just take that idea. That idea alone, you could spend all day thinking about that one. About the fact that we are literally connected. We become the stuff that we are contained inside of. And as human beings, I'm really pretty sure that we are nodes. Okay? I'm pretty sure that the entire universe is one thing that is in motion. I'm pretty sure it doesn't have much of a memory. That's what I was grokking and started to talk about and then stopped myself. Is that the problem with the universe as an intelligence remembering something is that now you have the problem of what's the storage mechanism? How would it store the memory? Okay? And if it stores the memory, the data requirements of 1 split second of the current motion state of the universe would require as much data storage as the entire universe. Okay, so the only thing you could do is come up with some sort of vector format or some sort of more compact, compressible data store that would allow the universe to remember prior states. What that means in practice is that the universe is not able to reverse time. The reason it can't reverse time is because it can't accurately recreate a prior state of motion. I hope that makes sense, but so then the question becomes, well, what is memory and what memory do we have? And I would say that the memory that the universe has is the memory that is stored within the nodes of the universe. In other words, you as a human being have things you remember, but you kind of build a little story around it and you report it, and a lot of what you remember isn't particularly accurate. And guess what? It turns out that actually serves the universe very, very well. Over the short term and the long term, it's more detrimental in the short term. But in the long term, what that means is that the universe is constantly recreating itself. And getting back to my analogy about taking a drink of water, what that means is that when you die, you literally become the soil. You literally become the tree that grows out of that soil, yada, 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 yada. This isn't even disputable. The thing that's disputable is what role your soul or your conscience your consciousness. What role does your self-awareness play outside of your sense of self that you currently want to protect and you don't really want to get rid of, obviously. Hence, everybody's a little bit worried about this crazy little thing called dying. I am increasingly becoming convinced that dying and living are actually the same thing. One becomes the other. One is absolutely necessary for the other. We know that everything is just changing. When I take that drink of water, the water is simply changing states because the molecules get broken down into their constituent parts, and then those atoms are used to construct new cells in your body. And so the water's not gone. It's just a new thing. Valerie's over there going, what the hell are you talking about today, Dave? Okay, I'm going to take a moment here and say, this is kind of interesting. Don't mind if I go quiet. Sorry, my internet keeps knocking out. No problem, brother. Okay. Amar says, that's why I always say we make ourselves more important than we really are when we're nothing but a speck in the scope of the universe. Absolutely right, my friend. 100%. I went through a Niels Bohr obsession and fell heavily into discussions like this with our dad, who was deeply interested in these questions. We decided light was both a particle and a wave. Well, if you look at the field, okay, so you can argue whether there's an ether field, right? In other words, something we can't really measure, and people talk about dark matter. Usually when people talk about it, they literally don't have any idea what they're talking about. They're just using the best language they can to describe something that they can't actually explain that well. I get that, okay? So it's a decent approximation, okay? But if you want to think of the world as a field in a way that we can measure, that we can be sure of, then what you can be sure of is that you are surrounded by a negative space that's completely equivalent to the physical space you occupy. In other words, I've got atmosphere, for example, around my hand right now. My hand is surrounded by atmosphere, and that atmosphere is, as I'm doing this, what it's surrounding consists of is interacting. Now, some things might be going through, for sure. That's a possibility. We know that's true. Radio waves, let's say. To some degree light, actually, but okay. So, but the space is, there is no space. There is no space. The most reasonable conclusion, which science, just in the current generation, science is finally catching up with this. You know, they're talking. It's like some novel discovery that we're all kind of sort of starting to agree that there really is no such thing as empty space. Well, duh. Not that I know there's no empty space, but to think that there would not be is by far the most reasonable assumption. Clearly, there's something that represents the complete inversion of anything that's positive. That didn't make any sense. So the cup is positive. Everything surrounding it, which, by the way, is the entire universe. The entire universe is surrounding this cup. So the cup is the positive, and the entire universe around it is the negative. Okay? One doesn't move without the other moving. Ever. Right? They are demonstrably connected. Okay, so we're nothing beyond what we can physically explore. And I mentioned beyond what we can remember as well. Okay, so I feel intellect and imagination contribute substantially to the physical exploration. These discussions are really important, though, I think, because when we realize that we all have these thoughts, we all have these questions, then this becomes, again, something that sort of connects us. So Max says it's more fun to talk about your experiences like the one with music and commercial. Well, okay, that's fair. I'm thinking about that, Max, by the way. I'm thinking about doing something on the music side of things. You don't remember as human realistically a moment. Why would the universe? It's all about interpretation. Yeah, my current best commonsensical assumption would be that the universe does not record its prior states of motion. And if that's true, then, as I said, what that means is the only memory is contained within the universe, and therefore history repeats itself. You have to learn the same lessons over and over. Civilizations come and go. Entire systems, are born, live, and die. Solar systems, let's say. Just like we as people. We're born, we live, we die. It seems to me that that's the most reasonable assumption, that it's not remembered, which means that functionally time travel is impossible because the universe doesn't have a way to recreate a current earlier state of motion. And look who's here. Oh, and by the way, I forgot that I'm supposed to be DarrenT today. Good afternoon, all. So I'm saying that as best I can in Darren's voice. Okay, so energy moves and flows like water, and energy never dies, it transforms. So that's a great comment, Amar, because it speaks to what I'm talking about. Everything changes form, and so I don't know why we would think that we're any different. The problem with that is that so that's one of the biggest problems with Christianity, actually, Christianity, at least as it exists in Western culture, has really propagated this idea of separateness. You know, that we think of ourselves as autonomous things that only have one lifetime. We're born, we die, we're judged, right? So God is separate, we're separate, we get one shot, which by the way, if you look at if you're a game theory person or something, if you're going to look at the rules of the game and how that sets us up, the way some evangelicals look at it, for either success or failure, you're at about a 99.9999999% failure rate, right? Because what about all the people who never heard this story? You know, it's now there are things in the Bible you can get into that kind of sort of try to answer that question. So, and believe me, I'm aware of that. But okay, so if memory in a person changes almost the moment it becomes a memory, then does the memory of the universe also evolve and change that it no longer remembers what objectively happened? My best assumption is because of the data storage requirements and the fact that, by the way, that memory that we can investigate proves often to be wrong, then why would we expect memory anywhere to be any different? Thus allowing you to transport time and space on a level beyond explanation. Not quite sure what that means. We come to a point of who's interpreting the memories or data. That's exactly right, Max. That's true. Exactly. It's especially true with religion and science, where people are told to believe and trust science, most time based on theory, but not based on experience. So you need to define empty space. Well, I would define empty space as being utter and complete stupidity. That's how I would define empty space, because I don't think there is any such thing, at least at this point. So, and I only hijacked you because you're gone, by the way, Darren. I'm not, I just figured I'd fill your space. These conversations are fun because I'm actually making an entire comic book universe, or at least 2 comic book universes about these ideas and concepts. Well, you know what? I think that's cool. I think that this kind of stuff really feeds stories. Well, okay, so this gets into one of my regrets in life. Is if you look at the films I've made and some of the ideas that I've espoused in those films, it's usually not very heavy-handed, but definitely there are ideas espoused in those films that come from a decidedly white evangelical Christian vantage point, which I no longer have. I still identify as a Christian, but boy, it's a pretty nebulous form that that I won't break down now. There's no need to, but my thinking right now is that if I have a strong, I'm kind of violating this rule right now, frankly, by talking about some of these things. But if I've got a strong idea about the way things are or the way things should be, I think that a really healthy place from which to share that idea is through a story, is through your creativity. Particularly because you as a storyteller then are put in a position where if you're going to write a good story, you have the responsibility now to deal with conflict, which means that you need a character that represents the opposite view that you're trying to espouse in your story. And so that forces you to have a more even-handed approach to some of these deeper ideas, right? So, test. I asked about the people who never heard the story, and they covered them. Also, there used to be reincarnation in Christianity until about 250 or 350. Exactly right. Well, here's one of the problems. Here's the problem with a real simple example of a problem with the Bible. Okay, here's a problem with the Bible. Christians get all excited and Twitter-pated when they find out, like, for example, in recent years, we found out that we had a book of Mark that dated like 50 years from the time of Christ. And everybody got really excited, and some major evangelical figures throughout, my lifetime, like Josh McDowell, jumped on that, and boy, we're all excited because, this even proves better and better and better that the Bible we have is the real Bible. Okay, but there's 2 problems with that. Number one is that this book of Mark turned out to be a forgery or a fake. And some of those figures in evangelical Christian culture have not walked back their premature enthusiasm with the level of integrity one might hope. But there's a bigger problem. You know what the bigger problem is? Completely setting aside the role that the Flavians, like Titus Flavius, had working with Constantine to and his cousin Josephus, who switched sides to the Roman side, so all of the history he wrote is in question, but completely setting aside Constantine and the whole way that they arrived at the canon of Scripture. We sit and we debate and talk about whether the Scripture we have is really accurate to the original Scripture, but there's a major problem no one seems to talk about. And the problem is that we have at least 50 and more like 150 years of oral history that happened before anything was written. So it isn't a question of whether we have integrity in the written documents. It's a question of what's the level of integrity in the oral tradition that preceded the documents. Well, nobody talks about that because there's no way to prove any of it. And there's no documentation to be found. So, of course, that's a problem. And so what do we as Christians do? Well, we ignore it. We pretend the problem doesn't exist. It's a big problem. It's not a little problem. And so the reality is that if we applied the same standard of scrutiny to the way we look at the Christian books, if we applied the same standard to that we apply to everything else, we'd be going, I'm not so sure about this. There's a lot of problems. So I'm not one of these guys that's going to the extreme of saying, well, this guy Jesus never existed. There is a case to be made for that. And it's not a super strong case. But it's certainly healthy to it's healthy to be willing to entertain the question, isn't it? Right? Hey, Chris K. Okay, so I've asked about the people who never heard this story, and they cover the reincarnation. And by the way, Max is correct. Reincarnation was absolutely part of the Christian tradition until much, much, much later. I tend to look at life as we all have a purpose and a goal is fulfilled that purpose. Right? Oh, yeah, sure. If we don't do that, then our hell and our heaven is eternal peace. Now I have to repeat that cycle again. Well, again, and I actually think that the concept that most evangelical Christians have of hell is not even in the Bible, let alone part of the Christian tradition. I believe that the normal concept that white evangelicals have of hell is something that was basically invented by the Catholics in the Middle Ages to manipulate populations. And it worked very well. So, you know. So art is big on reincarnation. That's people deja vu. Deja vu may or may not have something to do with reincarnation, or past lives or whatever. But so Max is not really 150 years. Most of the great 12 became archpriests in Greek or Egypt. There are writings that they made. Well, okay, so now we're, now you have to give the same historical scrutiny to all those writings. There are no writings. So when you say 150 years, yes, you're correct. The earliest writings, as far as we know, are the writings of the Apostle Paul. There's plenty of problems you can find with the Gospels because of the way they evolve from presumably Mark and some source material first through each of the Gospels, I would say, ending with John, where you move from greater and greater and greater and greater levels of magic from the earlier to the later Gospels. But again, the Gospels came much, much later. So the point I made about this some time ago on a live stream, I want to make again. What we found out in the last 6 months is that we can have a major social event, like an election, where you have a population of 150 million people where the view we have of that history, basically, axiomatically, 50% of the people have to be wrong about what they think happened. So I don't need to take a position on whether it's the ones on the left or whether it's the ones on the right who are correct in their view of the history. Now you can guess my opinion. The takeaway for me is the fact that this is immediate history, not even a year ago, We've got the greatest technology, the greatest record in the history of mankind, and yet half the population absolutely must be wrong about what they think happened. We can't get it right today, a month later. And yet, how do we expect that the Christian guys 2,000 years ago got it right 100 years later? Well, it's easy. You just inject magic. Well, God is God, and so God made it. God took care of that. God made it work out okay. Well, okay. So Chris K says, are you Christian, Catholic, or Orthodox? I identify as Christian. I can summarize my Christian faith in 30 seconds. I believe there's a creator. It may be the infinite intelligence of the universe, but I believe there's a creator. Number one. Number two, if I say I know what happens after I die, I am a liar. Therefore, I really have no choice but depend on the benevolence of my creator. So I depend on my creator to do for me what I could not possibly do for myself, as far as I know. That summarizes my Christian faith. Nothing else. There is no other doctrine or theology. I think that one of the most overlooked verses in the Bible is, it says that by this we know, I can't quite remember it, but that God demonstrates his love for us, that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. I think that's a really interesting verse because of the one word that nobody ever pays any attention to, which is the word demonstrates. Okay, so if this all happened as described, let's assume for the sake of argument, for the moment, that it did. The key word there is demonstrates. So if you attach a bunch of prejudices and judgment and theology and doctrine and stuff your parents taught you to that, such that you make up this really complex story about the way all this stuff works. And, completely setting aside the fact that every generation seems to think they are the ones who figured it out. Yeah, every other one's wrong, but we're the ones who are right. And by the way, that's the same truth in the present. Yeah, the Mormons are wrong. The Mormons who heard a story and that story caught fire socioculturally. It did. There's a lot of them. But they're wrong. My story, which is just a story that caught fire socioculturally, is the right one. Yours is wrong, mine's right. How stupid is that? Like, how do you get to be that stupid? It's what I call ASAP. Like, let's deal with this ASAP. ASAP, as stupidly as possible. Let's deal with this as stupidly as humanly possible. Right? So that gets back to the election. I look at the election, I say, if it is possible for an entire population to be deceived, not saying which side's deceived, not saying which one, just saying, if it's possible in the modern day for a large group of people like that to be so completely wrong about something, why would we assume that any people or any age in time and history is any different? Look at Hitler. If it's possible for some tyrant, demagogue, dude to get a whole group of people to follow him, and it's happened many times in history, then why, when someone who kind of looks like a tyrant demagogue is trying to get everybody to follow him, why would we assume that they're benevolent? That's what I call ASAP. That's as stupid as possible. Now, it could be that they are benevolent. Could be they're a good guy. But so then the question becomes, let's follow this through psychologically. Then the question is, if you believe that story, if you believe that which is profoundly unlikely to be correct, why would you do that? I'll tell you why you do it. You do it because your tribe has taught you to, and there is a social cultural cost for you, or at least there's a cost you're afraid that you'll incur, that causes you to go stupid. You go stupid because it's safer to do so. And so then when you as a Christian encounter someone who's more knowledgeable than you, or who can compete with you intellectually, there's a strong proclivity to fall back on goofy little, I don't know what the word is but Christians have a language that they speak, right? I've been part of it. Come on, I was a worship leader for 8 years. I've been in this subculture for decades. Okay? This is what we do. And then we retreat back to our subculture where we have social proof that says, oh yeah, it's okay. Those people, they're just deceived by Satan, or whatever your argument is. Okay? I look at that as and by the way, thank you, Maria, for bringing some levity to the conversation. It's probably a good move. Okay, so let me back up just a little bit. Well, and to Max's comment about the dump, let's go back even further. There used to be 20 to 120 different Bibles. There were a lot of different writings. The arrival of the canon via the Council of Nicene was an extremely, as far as I can tell, an extremely corrupt process. Just without going deep on it, is my understanding that basically Constantine asserted that we need to have unanimity. There were a couple guys who dissented. They didn't have unanimity, and they achieved unanimity the way that we would do it today, which is take the two guys who disagree, tell them to go home, and now we have unanimity. Okay. Sorry, I missed a couple of minutes for an aspirin dose. Okay, the fear theory, which is used all the time. Absolutely, Amar. It is the number one way that we are manipulated both by others and by our own psychology. So Chris asked if I'm Christian, Catholic, or Orthodox. I think I've answered that. Hell is place like dump near the town, which is an actual dump. Yes, in the Bible, that's what, was it Gehenna? That's what Gehenna actually was. It was like a really crappy dump outside of town. That's where you would end up if you didn't respect it. Right, okay, so there you go. Thank you for that comment. Honestly, religion, politics, or social constructs have been used to engineer division, so it continues to divide. Okay, Amar's comment about that, I think that's a really significant comment, because it would be my opinion that religion, politics, and other social constructs are almost always used to engineer division or manipulation of populations. So when you hear any story that seems highly unlikely, like the story, I almost hate to go here because it totally reveals my actual position, but Donald Trump was telling the story for months before the election that there would be fraud. Well, you can look at that one of two ways. Either he has inside information and knew something we don't know, that he could not prove, that he couldn't document. There's nothing to demonstrate that he had any evidence for it, but yet he's either got inside information and basically he's magic, or he's lying. He's setting it up to say, well, if I win, I won, but if I lose, there was fraud. Okay, those are two completely reasonable views of what might have happened, I suppose. Okay? The question then vis-a-vis this discussion is, why would he do that? Well, he would do it because it benefited him to do it. It's not complicated. There's nothing complicated about that situation. While people that really run believe in nothing but success or failure, but most engineering success by mass control using these tools. Sounds like a very general theology in comparison to other Christians. Why keep the Christian label? That's a fair question. I mean, I think certainly in the media space, I'm known as a Christian filmmaker, and I think that I have an opportunity to get Christians to think. I think that is a role I could play maybe in the next few years, and so those are my peeps in a sense, and so I think that for that reason, and the other thing is, Tiny Salad, that I actually think my view of the, let's just say, the spiritual reality surrounding these things is probably more accurate to the original message of Jesus anyway. than anything that we've arrived at culturally. Okay? I think it's safe to be that kind of a Christian in terms of it actually matching up to reality better than what most of the isms that have come up over the centuries. Because remember, it's gone through this incredible evolution. You know, I mean, the Catholic Church has changed the rules of the game many times, and you can justify that. I mean, you can say, well, it's kind of like some people view the Constitution. You know, it's a living document, and you know, things change with time. It's not a ridiculous position to take. It's really not. Everything else evolves. Why shouldn't it? You know, so, okay, so hell is really a mental, sometimes physical state. Blah, 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 blah. I think the same religion was made to control people because it stood the test of time. And Max, great comment, Max. I love that because when somebody points something like that out to argue for it, here's what I say. I say, has anything else stood the test of time that we know for a fact now in history turned out to be wrong or evil or just wrong-headed? Has that ever happened? Because if it's ever happened, then we must ask ourselves, why would we assume that our thing is any different? Just standing the test of time doesn't mean anything. Islam stood the test of time. Okay? So, Maria added levity to the conversation. And again, I have a character based on that. She's a demigod. Cool. So, what you think about that shows like South Park or Rick and Morty doesn't make fun of all religion like Islam? Are you saying that they make fun of religion in general but not Islam? I'm not sure what you're asking there, Chris K. I appreciate the question. I think what you're saying is, what do you think about that shows like South Park or Rick and Morty, etc., don't make fun of all religion like Islam? My best answer is I would guess that that's just a choice they've made in order to, if they make fun of it, potentially they could alienate part of their audience, perhaps. I don't know. Can't speak for those guys. So, I love when this becomes a reality to tell people's story where the message requires more thought than it being literally. Gluttony is a sin. There are other commandments to respect. Okay, that's what religion revolves around. The commandments are useful to the tribe. That part is ignored in discussion. Well, I'm glad you brought it up then. You brought it up here in discussion, and I'm not going to ignore it. I think you're correct. I think the truth is that for the most part, the principles of the Ten Commandments are ethics that we all pretty much agree on. You know, I prefer the Confucius version of the Golden Rule, which is the negative of the Jesus version. The Jesus version says, do unto your neighbor as you would have done unto you. Now that's a little dangerous because you may like having fellatio performed on yourself. Does that mean you should go perform it on your neighbor? That's kind of dangerous, right? The Confucius version is, don't do to your neighbor what you wouldn't want done to you. I think that's a little more utilitarian. So it screws with people's heads more, but it lures. Okay. Momoristic. Hello, Momoristic. Islam jokes are a little too non-something. N-O-N? I don't know what N-O-N means. The Vatican murdered so many people and stood the test of time. Exactly right. You know, I look at the Inquisition and you go, you think about terrorism and you think about abuses of human rights and stuff today. They were off the chart. And again, basically the Ten Commandments are fairly utilitarian as an ethical framework on which to kind of decide what you can be pretty safe assuming your neighbor would appreciate you doing. Okay, your neighbor probably doesn't want you stealing his wife or stealing his stuff or killing him. Okay, right? So we kind of agree about that. So, all right, I think, so obviously we're not going to get to this. Is there anything else? Now, by the way, I would say this too. Having a YouTube channel, We'll get to looking at this video next time. If you guys want to see me unpack some of the creative challenges of this thing, I can do that, but I don't think it's going to happen today. So we'll just switch back to the black screen and maybe go back to the webcam because, again, I am so handsome. Commitment is what we know is Christianity was extracted from African theologies. That could well be. Man, I don't know. There are plenty of... I mean, I was watching on the Myth Vision podcast YouTube channel. They were talking about... they live streamed just a couple days ago quite exhaustively about religious traditions that predate Christianity that had a personal, literal death and resurrection story as central to the tradition. And it turns out there's quite a lot of them. So, great conversation. Thanks for indulging with us today. Yeah, and again, apologize for excoriating you earlier. I really didn't mean to. Your presence and input here is always welcome. Okay, so I think with that, I'm thinking I'm going to wrap up. The point I was going to make and didn't is that it would really be interesting to have a YouTube channel devoted to nothing but this kind of stuff. And maybe doing what I talked about in the earlier part of the video today about, creating short, mid, and long-form content to support the idea of let's just throw an idea out there that makes people think a little bit and then expand on it. And then also have live streams like this where people can actually weigh in and argue, to an extent. It's all good. Or a podcast, absolutely. I probably should do a podcast because when I get into my theory of everything, like the whole idea that I tell Valerie, I'm like, I don't think there is any such thing as time, and she's a real smart person. She's got her own ideas, right? And she just doesn't agree with that position. I think for me, I've made a good case for it in the sense that our proclivity to look back and tell a story that we know is a thing, and the fact that our memories are so bad, so we are always creating stories to explain our own reality to ourselves. So when you combine that with the idea of motion, I ask the question again that I asked earlier is, if your state could be restored to an earlier state of motion, in other words, everything is where it was at some quote-unquote earlier time, how would you explain that to yourself? Surely the explanation you would give is that I must have traveled back in time. So, for me, I don't think time is a thing. I think it's only multiple coalescing dimensions of motion. And time is just the way we explain it to ourselves. So Maria's like, that'd be a great idea. I maybe the great idea is having to guess. I'm not sure. I wanted to create one. I think it's so much easier to do nowadays. Yeah, I just haven't gone down the podcast path. Yeah, a lot of podcasts are simulcast on YouTube anyway, so the idea would be to do a podcast. Now, by the way, some things that are coming up for those who are interested. There is, speaking of my Christian peeps, I've got a friend who was instrumental in my film career. I wouldn't have really had the opportunity I had if it wasn't for this guy. And he has a podcast video program that's he doesn't have a lot of subscribers on YouTube, but his show is on a lot of different platforms other than YouTube. And he's going to be doing an interview, talking head type interview, talking to me about what I've been doing as a filmmaker and how that's changed into making cartoons. And so that should be coming up soon. I think we're maybe going to do it this Thursday, and when it comes, if I can, I'll copy it back here. Isaac comes from a decidedly evangelical vantage point, but at the same time, it's been really encouraging to see how the guys that I know that are like that, we have some really interesting conversations where they seem to appreciate the more, I would say, eclectic view of reality that I've arrived at this point in my life. And so, as to get back to I forget who asked the question, but I think that's why I still identify as a Christian, is that it could be that the story as we understand it is true. That is possible, actually. But I don't think that, whether it is or isn't, I don't think that we can arrive at a really good place as people as we enter the age of Aquarius. I don't think we can arrive where we're supposed to be unless we can throw off the shackles of some of these prejudices and fears and deal in good faith with one another. And I think with that, that's probably a good place to stop. I'm approaching the 2.5-hour point. And if there's nothing else, if there is, somebody post something. Because if not, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up in a couple of minutes. And once again, apologize to Darren T. for stealing his live stream time slot. I won't do it again. Well, actually, I might do it. I might do it next week if he's going to be gone again. If he's not, then I'm going to get out of the way. And for those who don't know what I'm talking about, that would be Darren T. He's in the chat. Oh, there's Darren. Darren, are you going to be back next week? So for those of you who are into the animation thing and aren't necessarily so into all this esoteric staring at our navels baloney, tune into Darren T's live stream. It's typically on Sundays. Tea time, he calls it, and he goes into all kinds of things he's doing with OpenTunes and Tahoma 2D. Okay, so Max says, faith in the amount of a grain of salt makes you walk on water. So does the hypnosis. I don't know if I'll be back in time, so I'll know by next Saturday. Yeah, just let me know, because what I might do, because I'm figuring out what my next time is going to be to live stream, as far as doing something that's on a regular basis, and so I don't want to set the precedent of doing it on Sunday. That's for sure. But so I think probably the safe path at this point would be to say I probably will not be live streaming next Sunday. I'm probably just going to stay out of the way and not kind of make that a habit. And then over the next couple weeks, I'll be figuring out what might be 1 or 2 regular times to go ahead and live stream. So with that, I think I will end it. Thanks for being here, guys. It's been really a lot of fun. I have appreciated the opportunity to really... And thanks, Art with AMRV. Thanks, Amar. The opportunity today that I have, as I evaluate myself, I say that I've courageously chosen to speak from the heart today, to truly talk very openly about some things that I care about, and I think this might be part of my pathway forward. You know. The greatest contribution I'm going to make to the world is probably going to come from being who I actually am. Right? Seems to make sense. So anyway, Saturday, I've done live streams on Saturday. Probably that may turn out to be the definitive day. And again, I may test, if I do 10 in the morning versus like 5 at night or something like that. But weekly or bi-monthly. Yeah. Yep. That's what I was thinking. So with that, I will sign off. As you guys know, there will be more later. Oh, wait. How would I say that? Oh, yeah. I've got to say this the Darren T way. And that's a Darren T.